Recently, the Palm Springs Kiwanis Club had another great speaker. Let's listen in.
I have given more than 100 talks in the past several years, but this is the first time I share my own story as Dennis requested. And I just want to tell you a little bit how I end up being here today. I was born and raised in China, and it was very interesting because my parents survived the Great Cultural Revolution of China. That was between 1966 to 1976, when intellectuals were very, very persecuted by the Chinese government because they thought any education would give people independent thinking. So to maintain their authority for those 10 years, they shut down all schools in China and persecuted intellectuals. And unfortunately, both of my parents graduated from top universities right before the Cultural Revolution started. My father thought he would be a nuclear scientist, but he was taken to a coal mine and dig the coals for almost 10 years. My mother thought she would be a government official, but then she was taken to a car shop and worked as a secretary for the rest of her life. But the worst than that was that they were separated in 2 provinces. They were only allowed to be together for several weeks per year. And that was, during those 10 years, that was how me and my brother were born and raised by my mom. And I guess like at the end of the Cultural Revolution, my father, his health became so bad because of digging the coal and very bad food, and 3/4 of his stomach was removed. And because he lost so much blood, the Communist Party thought he would die. So they allowed him to be together with my mother again. That was how my family finally got together. But this experience of the persecution by the Chinese government deeply hurt my parents. I remember when I was a child, they kept telling you, Wen, you just need to go to school and you need to find a job, but you never, ever be a top student. But it was very interesting. I remember when I was 6 years old, I played with other kids, and everyone said, oh, I want to be a bus driver when I grow up. I want to be a soldier. And I immediately said, I want to be a scientist. That was such an unusual thing for a 6-year-old girl to say that. And it was very interesting because my parents wanted to protect me, so they sent me to a very bad high school. So they said, okay, this high school is very close to our home. We know all the teachers there so that we can protect you. But I was very, very interested in science and math. When I was 16 years old, I went to a national competition for talented chemistry students. I won the first prize in China. That allowed me to enter any university in China. Then pretty much blocked my parents' arrangement because they had to let me go. And that was how I came to Caltech in 1995 as a graduate student. That was a very fascinating experience because I thought I was a very smart student when I came, but then soon I realized I was so brainwashed by the Communist Party. And because all this Tiananmen massacre, all the killing, all the history of Communist Party, I had no idea. When my classmates and lab mates in Caltech showed me the pictures and the videos of the Tiananmen massacre in 1989, when the Chinese Communist Party killed thousands of students for demonstrating for freedom in Tiananmen Square, I said, no, they were made in Hollywood. I said nobody was killed. That's what my government told us. And, it took me 5 years to be awakened from those brainwashing. And I remember by the end of 2000, I decided that I want to devote a part of my time speaking on human rights of China. And that was how I started to work as a volunteer for the Epoch Media Group, including a 24/7 TV station, a daily Chinese newspaper, and a weekly Chinese English newspaper. The Epoch Media Group covers 35 countries in 12 languages. That's the largest Chinese media that's independent from the Communist Party. And it was very interesting how I got involved with Shen Yun because when we were in China, we were very brainwashed and traditional Chinese culture was very, very demonized also because the Communist Party do not want anything to compete with their authority. So when first time I saw Shen Yun in 2007, I was totally shocked because I never realized that my own culture was so beautiful. So that's why today I'm going to talk a little bit about the Chinese culture and the history. Speaking about Chinese culture, many of you know that China has 4,000 years of history, but you may not realize that 3 religions influence the whole Chinese history: Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism. People in China in ancient times always believed that everyone came to this world to improve ourselves so that when we die, we're good enough to return our home in heaven. These three religions shaped the whole Chinese culture and influenced almost every part of Chinese teachings. For example, you know Kung Fu Panda and Bruce Lee, right? Martial arts is very famous. One of the most famous schools is called Shaolin Martial Arts. They were founded by Buddhist monks about 1600 years ago and was always passed down by Buddhist monks. Another kind of martial art you may not realize was Tai Chi. Although it looked very slow and gentle, it can be very, very powerful during battles. Tai Chi was founded by Taoist monks about 400 years ago and was always passed down by Taoist monks in Wudang Mountain in Sichuan province. Another example is Chinese medicine that cure diseases with herbs and acupuncture because Chinese medicine regards the whole human body as a universe, and there are energy flowing along your body, following channels that you cannot detect with your naked eyes, but Chinese doctors can. And if any place is blocked, the energy cannot go through, that's when human beings get diseases. And this concept of human body as a universe actually came from Taoism. So actually Chinese medicine originated from Taoism teachings. You see this kind of influence everywhere in ancient Chinese culture. This spiritual practice shaped the Chinese culture and also brought a very strong moral conduct throughout the Chinese history. Ancient Chinese teachers, they always look for their students, and students cannot choose their teachers. And when they search for students, they always look for students with the highest morality, the most honest person who want to serve the country. Then they think this student will become expertise in what he or she wants to study. And I like to tell this story to my two daughters when they were children. I told them that, 2,000 years ago, there was a governor of China. His name was Yang Zhen. He was also a very famous teacher. Many of his students became officials. So this was a very, very powerful man. One night, a student came to him with a bag of gold as gift. And the teacher rejected the bribe. The student said, "Teacher, it's midnight. Nobody saw us. Why don't you just take the gold?" The teacher responded, "How could you say nobody saw us? Heaven knows, earth knows, you know, and I know. So at least the four beings know that you're giving me the gold." And that was how ancient Chinese scholars and government officials disciplined themselves with their spiritual guidance. Because even when the law cannot watch them, they believe that they are watched by divine beings, by their religion, by their belief. And this kind of guidance made ancient Chinese culture brilliant. Not only ancient Chinese was famous for their literature and art, they were also very advanced in science and technology. This is a painting done in 10th century that showed the painting about the capital of China about 1,300 years ago. The capital of China, Chang'an, at that time, gathered 100,000 foreigners. Think about 7th century, how difficult it was for a foreigner to travel to China. And if you come to Los Angeles today, right, you see Chinatown, you see Koreatown, you see Little Tokyo. People all over the world came to the U.S. to study. In 7th century, China was regarded as the center of the world. People from many countries went to China, and they also formed little colonies in the capital of China. And you can go to these colonies, you can eat their food, you can see their performance, and these foreigners also brought their culture to ancient Chinese. And it was very interesting because China had many dynasties. At the end of the dynasty, that means the country was taken by another group. Sometimes China was taken by a foreign country, invaded by a foreign country. But these invaders, instead of destroying Chinese culture, they highly appreciate this spiritual guidance. They see the benefit they can bring to the society. So these invaders, they chose to become Chinese, to start a new dynasty and become the next generation Chinese. That was how Chinese culture continued for 5,000 years with no interruption, because invaders became Chinese. But things changed after the Communist Party came to China, because that was the first time China was invaded or taken by a group of atheists. Communist Party do not believe in any religion or spiritual guidance because they think to rule in their country, they must have propaganda and violence. And any spiritual belief, even independent thinking like education, they think it's a competition to their authority. So during the Cultural Revolution, for 10 years, they destroyed almost every temple of China. And they sent all intellectuals to countryside or labor camps, and the whole school system was shut down for 10 years. Even Chinese characters were altered. traditional Chinese characters was like a picture to symbolize its meaning and also carry its value. For example, to the left is the Chinese character love. The very top means family, and the bottom means friends. And most importantly, the center means heart. So when I try to learn how to write love, immediately you understand, okay, love means you have your friends, you have your family, you keep them in your heart, you treat them sincerely. After the Communist Party simplified more than 2,000 characters, love was left without a heart. Nowadays, whenever I saw news reports that China's divorce rate is almost 50%, I always blame this love without a heart. Think about, for like half a century, Chinese people growing up without realizing that you need to have a heart when you love someone. How can they maintain a good relationship? You can imagine by the end of the Cultural Revolution, for 10 years there was no education system, not even doctors in hospitals. Chinese economy almost completely collapsed. That was when the Communist Party started to make a change, because they say, oh, we have to make money so that we can maintain the authority. But still, their atheist nature would not allow spiritual practice to become popular. So they combined the superficial form of Chinese culture with communism and turned Chinese culture in China into a propaganda way. For example, they rebuilt many temples, but the people cannot practice their religion there. These temples were used as tourist spots to make money, and some temples even hired people to pretend to act as nuns or monks, especially in places like Tibet. And at the end of the day, these fake monks or nuns, they went back home and they have their family, they have their car, they still have their own house, live their own life. And performing arts especially was used to promote the Communist Party's violence and propaganda. And they actually sent a lot of performing arts groups to other countries to promote communism. And the crackdown, the persecution towards religion never stopped. You probably have heard from news all the time how the Communist Party of China persecuted Christians or Catholics and also Tibetan Buddhists. The largest group, according to Amnesty International, under persecution in China is called Falun Gong. This is a meditation practice based on traditional Chinese culture with the principle of truthfulness, compassion, tolerance. About 10% of Chinese population practice it, but still the Communist Party thinks it's a threat because it's independent from communism. They started the persecution in 1999 and put millions of people in jail because they meditate for better health. And the persecution is still going on today. And during the past 60 years, because of the loss of traditional Chinese value and brainwashing of the communism, Chinese society has been quickly deteriorating its morality. And there are a lot of unbelievable news coming out from China. And what broke my heart in 2006 was the poisonous baby formula created by the state-run formula companies of China. These state-run formula companies, to make more money, they didn't use milk to make formula. They used a chemical substance. And this poisonous baby formula affected about 3 million Chinese babies. And in 2006, more than 6,000 babies were diagnosed as having kidney stone after they took the baby formula. You probably have seen poisonous food and toys from China all the time.
Right.
So this not only influenced China, but also any country who have business tie with China. For example, a Florida company found that in 2008, the drywalls they imported from China were poisonous. And these drywalls affected 100,000 American families in 23 states. It's very shameful to talk about this because I just mentioned how honest ancient Chinese were about the story of heaven knows, earth knows, and how could Chinese people do this nowadays? And what is the cure to the problem of China? Many people believe that, to solve the problem, the social problem in China, you need to recover traditional Chinese culture. But it is very difficult to do so in China because the Communist Party is still there. They're still suppressing freedom of thinking, freedom of expression. Chinese government, they built this great firewall on internet to prevent Chinese people from seeing any outside news. They cannot read LA Times in China. They cannot use YouTube. They cannot use Twitter, no Facebook, so that the Communist Party can continue to brainwash them. And they also blocked the websites of all the major universities like Caltech or Stanford or MIT or Harvard because they don't want Chinese people to see the Students' Club's website that can post anything they want. And that's why, and also many award-winning films and books, they are banned in China, because in China they had this censorship department. Anything published or circulating in China have to be censored by this department that must be praising the communism, and you cannot promote democracy there. That's why people form the Shenyun Performing Arts, because they want to recover Chinese culture in a society with freedom, like the United States. Shenyun in Chinese means the beauty of divine beings dancing. And that was formed in 2006 by a group of very top dancers, musicians, and artists. They left China because they wanted to have freedom to perform, to express, and they wanted to create a show so that people can experience authentic Chinese culture without the influence of the Communist Party. Like many traditional Chinese culture in other countries, culture is passed on, use legends and myths. And Shenyun actually, for 2 hours program, they have about 15 different programs. And a lot of them were about the Chinese myths and legends. For example, one of my favorite childhood story was about the Monkey King. And that was actually a real story based on a story of a monk who was in 7th century. This monk, he left China and spent 19 years to travel from China to India to study Buddhism. And then he brought back a lot of Buddhism scriptures. He translated them into Chinese. That was how Buddhism became popular in China. During his 19 years of journey, he encountered 81 different tribulations, different tests, or difficulties. And he overcame all of them with his faith, and legends say he had some very special companion to help him. One of them was a monkey. He was like a Superman. He was very, very naughty, very, very capable. He can transform his form and become an insect or animal and become a woman so that people cannot tell who he was. And then also a pig, very lazy but humorous. Also, the third one was an ogre who was very quiet but hardworking. You can imagine these 4 characters, they had unique personality, very different from each other. But they were very well described with classical Chinese dance. This is a very different dance system from ballet, because classical Chinese dance originated from martial arts. And in Chinese, they actually had the same pronunciation, but different character. So in their movement, you see a lot of similarity. In their training was also very similar. And you see a lot of amazing skills that you never experience in other dance forms. But the most important is what we call yun in Shenyun. That means what makes dance beautiful and expressive and storytelling. With all of these together, you see something really amazing. Don't you wish you can do that? That was amazing. Yeah. These are actually are Shenyun dancers. They are very, very top, most talented kids, teenagers recruited from all over the world, including from China, in the international dance competitions. And that's why this is a top dance and music company in the world. And Shenyun feature many different dynasties and many ethnic groups in China. Throughout the 5,000 years of culture of China, there were more than 20 dynasties, and nowadays there are still more than 50 ethnic groups. Every dynasty was like a new country, and every ethnic group is like a new country, with their unique dance, music, and costume. For example, this is a dance about Manchurian ladies. Manchurian is a northern Chinese tribe. They actually invaded China, and then they realized, okay, let's take over China, become a new generation. We are next generation Chinese. And they formed a dynasty called the Qing dynasty. That was the last dynasty of China. Have any of you seen the film, the movie, The Last Emperor? Yes, some of you, yes. The last emperor actually was a Manchurian, and this is how his wives would have looked like at that time. Manchurian ladies, they wore giant hats. They also wear high heels. Actually, if you pay attention to their shoes, it's high soles. Actually, it's 4 inches tall. I tried a pair of these shoes before. I could barely stand. But these dancers, they can dance, they can turn and jump with these shoes. It's just amazing. They look so elegant, but very, very amazing on stage. You also experience authentic Chinese music, because Shenyun always comes with a live orchestra that combines traditional Chinese musical instruments with Western Chinese symphony. with Chinese symphony to play the harmony and with Western symphony play the harmony and Chinese instruments to play the lead. For example, one of the instruments very famous in China is called the pipa, has 4,000 years of history and always associated with beautiful Chinese women. And another instrument also has 4,000 years called erhu, only has 2 strings, but it has like sound like a violin, can imitate many sound in nature and very expressive. Also, Shen Yun's costume were well researched to reflect the genuine Chinese history. As I mentioned, every dynasty has their costume, very different style. And this is a Tang Dynasty costume, famous for its vibrant color. That was from 7th to 10th century. Their costume were very vibrant with their color and broad sleeves. Golden yellow color actually is reserved for royal family. Only like emperor and empress and princesses and prince can wear them. Warriors wore armors and officials, they wore different colors according to their rank in the government. Have any of you seen Chinese brush painting before?
Yeah.
Some of you, yes. But can you imagine yourself living inside a brush painting, like the backdrop of the Shen Yun, and you see heavenly beauties flying around the mountains and suddenly pop out of the backdrop and land on stage? And how about our ancient hero shooting his magic arrow towards the sun in the backdrop and turn the sun into a bird or a flame? This is an interactive backdrop that can attract the audience and make them travel to another time and space and be part of the story. With all of these together, dance, music, costume, and backdrop, Shen Yun was able to tell the myths and legends throughout the 5,000 years of history of China. From the very ancient legend of how human beings came, because divine beings in different layers of the universe descended to the earth. They were immortals, but then they started human race, according to Chinese legend. To the modern story of how Falun Gong followed the traditional Chinese culture to discipline themselves, to guide themselves with traditional Chinese guidance. And this actually gave people a kind of hope because they realized that not only this ancient wisdom existed in history, you can also apply them to modern life. And that was very encouraging to many audiences. And that was how Shen Yun touched millions of audiences' heart, including many celebrities. For example, Donald Karen, the creator of DKNY, encouraged everyone to go see Shen Yun and learn from it. Kate Blanchett also found it very, very beautiful, very attractive to see Shen Yun. And also a lot of Hollywood film producers found their inspirations from the Shen Yun shows, like the film producer for Avatar. Every year, Shen Yun toured to more than 100 cities in over 30 countries. That is only a partial list. And they will also come to our town in March and April. They are coming to Claremont in March, at the end of March, and also going to downtown Los Angeles at the end of April. And at the end of my talk, I'd like to show you a very short video clip, just 30 seconds, about Shen Yun.
5,000 years of Chinese music and dance in one night. Incredible, groundbreaking, a cultural phenomenon. A must-see. Experience Shen Yun. For showtimes at
Okay, sorry for the video, kind of jam, but that's the end of my talk. Thank you very much.
For more, go to KIWANIS of PALM SPRINGS.org.